Welcome back to my ever-growing mass of octopus cables as I slowly lose control over my living space, taken over by a bunch of modules and this one single crazy patch that I've been working on for weeks. And it is indeed a giant of a patch. It may well be the largest patch ever documented on video. We'll see if I have enough cables. I had to order in extra cables and mults just to be able to set up this whole behind-the-scenes form engine, as I like to call it, that controls a bunch of what's going on from very few voltages so that we can have some control over the piece over time. And that really, in my opinion, is one of the beauties of modular. Whether you're making this type of crazy weird music or you're making really straight ahead, pop music with great lyrics and a beat you can dance to, you can use these types of voltage arrays and types of patching styles to get control over your music and get it to go places and do things in different special ways that you wouldn't normally be able to do very easily or very organically in your average DAW. So now we are listening to the melody's counterpart voice, and it is the green trace on our oscilloscope. The dope for VU meter is showing us that we're at about a volt, so that means that we're running our first scale, which is that weird C major 7th chord, but with an add 9 and no third. So it's a fairly simple set of melodies that we're going to be hearing as our counterpart voice kind of skips through those 4 notes. The counterpart voice gets its Krell envelope from maths simply because I ran out of channels and quadracs and didn't have room or time to get another one in. But it certainly was something worth thinking about because it would make this much, much easier. So here's channel 1 of maths. And if we take a look at those 2 LEDs right above my finger, that is the output of the Krell envelope for this counterpart voice. Now the counterpart voice is unique, if you recall from previous videos, in that it's created by sending a tip-top Z3000 pulse oscillator into the external in of Immutable Instruments elements, and so basically that incoming wave shape is our exciter, and I'm sweeping that waveform up and down over a couple octaves so that we hear a bunch of different harmonics coming out of elements. Then the output of elements, which is being highly modulated from the Krell envelope coming out of maths, that output then goes on to a filter and onto a VCA and becomes like a regular voice. So depending on what filter type we've got running, we might hear more or less of those harmonics. Now, just like the quadracs, like I showed in the earlier videos, the maths will respond to changes in the master voltage that we're seeing on the dope for VU. So in this case, if I start to increase it, you can see the VU going up, I'm able to increase the rate of maths. Maths has a cool little trick that lets me do it. And that cool little trick is that you can patch a voltage into the both input that lets maths function like a regular oscillator, so that a higher voltage that goes in will speed up the rise and fall at the same time that I've got 2 different voltages coming into rise and fall to modulate that envelope to create my Krell envelope from it. So it's a really easy way to get my whole Krell to speed up. And if you'll remember from a couple videos ago, as the voltage increases and the Krells speed up, so do they're just right up here, the modulating LFOs from our Dalek modulator and our Vulcan modulator voltage controlled LFO units. So as I increase the voltage, we're getting up to about 4 volts out of the dope for VU, and we can start to hear our melody, our counterpart melody, getting a little bit brighter, and you can start to see it speeding up there. by watching those little LEDs. And then eventually, as I cross another quantizer threshold, I'll get to my final scale shape. My D half diminished, or -7 flat 5 with a couple extra chromatic tones thrown in for good measure. And now I've got maths running pretty quick. Now, unlike quadracs, there's no really simple way to modulate the shape of maths, especially without changing its speed, as changing it from its own log and exponential shapes will tend to change its rate. There is a way to patch its output back to its input, so I could certainly set up a patch that would allow me to change its shape, but then trying to do that without altering its speed too much could be a real headache. Now this voice, you might remember, gets its notes from the exact same sample and hold output as the melody part. But the difference is that I'm using logic in an IntelliGel plug module to make a choice by listening to the output of maths, listening to its gate output, and at the same time listening to the gate output from the end of cycle of our quadracs over here that's doing our melody part. And then what the plug does is it applies some logic to that so that I can choose whether or not the counterpart voice is grabbing a note at the same time or different times in different ways, depending on its logic type, than the melody. And this is still true even though I'm changing the speed of everything. It'll go through and it'll do that, and we'll have a listen to that in a minute. But before we do, we're going to take a look at something else I patched up really quick. So now I've reduced our master voltage back down to just over 1 volt, so I'm back at my very first scale. And here is the specialized filter that I'm using for this voice. And the F means that I've currently got the Doepfer A107 morphin filter set in its filter display mode. Essentially what I've done is I've created a sequence of the first 32 types of filters that are available, just in sequence from 1 to 32, and they display beside this F as they change. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the same voltage that I'm using to control the speed of the Krell, the reverb, the scale type, and I'm using it to control our filter type. And as I slide that Doepfer ribbon up, the voltage increases on the VU, and we'll start to see the numbers on that filter changing. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and consider joining my Patreon to help me make more videos and weird music in the future. Thank you so much. See you next time.